What's up, all you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? It is once again the Let Them Eat Toast podcast, hopefully better than the last time. I've got Taylor with me, and Chris is still here for some reason, and he's also a millennial, so I guess he'll be around probably some more. And today we are talking about millennial representation in Congress, and I think Congress needs to. This is where Cody should put in "Bring Out Your Dead" on splice over "Bring Out Your Dead," Cody. All right,
I'm not dead yet.
Bring out your dead.
All right. And get some younger people in there.
Right. Replacement.
Or whoever has the remote control for Mitch McConnell, at very least, quit pushing pause on it. It's starting to worry everybody.
Just need to blow in and reinsert the cartridge again.
Slap it really hard a couple times.
So what you're saying is, if Mitch McConnell gets a good blowjob, he'll get a little more pep in his step.
I mean, all I'm gonna say is Bill Clinton was a decent president. So I'm not making any inferences, or maybe I am. I'm just saying that, occasionally a little blowy might go a long ways. It's worth looking into, is all I'm saying. But Bill Clinton is the youngest president that we've had, with the exception of Barack Obama, in over 30 years.
An oldie and not so goodie.
Yeah. And this has been a problem that gets more and more, I think, obvious to people as, as Washington has just become a nursing home. Obviously, Mitch McConnell has literal nurses, caregivers sitting up there like, did you hear what the reporter said, Mitch? I was bingo going for you. It's gotten bad. The average age of Senate is 65. That's up over a decade, well over a decade of the average age of 1952, of 52 in 1981. Congress is up to 57. They were 49 in 81. And as
81 was a low point.
It was,
mind you. So if you did like an actual graph, a line, it probably the average would be a little bit higher. But it shows
the contrast
a lot higher right now than I think the average.
Although 1981 we had the oldest president in history until Biden and Trump maybe, but Reagan was physically older, and that's when everything leads back to Reagan. That's when everything started going downhill with Congress and Senate and the presidents getting older and older and older.
I don't know why. I just think that Jimmy Carter is the oldest president. I don't know why. It just feels like he's always been the oldest.
Because he's still alive and he's like 95.
Well,
but he wasn't. No,
when he was in. I've seen videos of him. He just looks like he was born 200 years ago.
He was younger than Reagan.
I get it.
I mean, he is younger than Reagan. Thankfully, Reagan is still dead.
Haven't brought him back yet.
Yep. Every morning I wake up and
still gone.
Thank Jeebus. But yeah, Biden is physically older than Bill Clinton today. Which just, you think about that. Bill Clinton was the first president elected when in my lifetime. I was born in 90s, elected in 92, and is 4 years younger than Joe Biden. That's how bad it's gotten. And George W. Bush was younger than Clinton by just a few months. Trump is older than Clinton and Bush by a few months. Barack Obama kind of bucked the trend, but is still a boomer. So we have had just aging leadership, from the White House all the way on down. And that's obviously been a problem, because now we have a group of leaders who does not represent the demographics in our country, and we're kind of getting fucked.
For contrast, remember, Bill Clinton has been retired effectively since January of 2001. He has been, not doing anything to earn real money as a job for 20 some years. And Biden's still I feel like going to work today.
Yep. And that's an issue.
Job.
Yeah.
I admit is the presidency.
See, at least for Biden, where Obama, he got in there, he was young, he was hip, and then he like aged like 40 years in those 8 years. Like he just came out gray and wrinkled and old.
He was like Ewan McGregor showing up in Tatooine, and then Ian the original
right,
Obi-Wan.
Yeah. And at least with Biden, you're not going to notice because he got in there older than Jesus, and now he's still older than Jesus. But the real question is, like, what is the spread? We see the high prominent, and obviously you're going to get more people who have been in there longer dominating the news, right? Because those are the people with the seniority. Those are the people who've been making policy longer. And just to kind of demonstrate, I think, the disparity, we have 100 senators and 435 Congress people.
Begins with a 7, but
I'm pretty sure it's 435. I looked at
it depends if you count voting or non-voting members of Congress.
Ooh, that's a good point. Yeah, Puerto Rico and whatnot, they don't count.
And like DC sends a rep, but they don't get a vote.
Yeah,
so Maxine Waters also
maybe
so confusing.
I don't know. Anyway, there's well over 400 Congress people. Of them, there is one Gen Z Congressperson. So good for you for Gen Z for getting in there early. 52 millennials out of 430 some odd. Congress people, 52 of them are our generation. And then there's 166 Gen X, which feels pretty okay. 23 of them in the Senate, only 3 millennials in the Senate.
For 15% of the population, that's about 15% of the seats. So like they're close.
Yep, they're close, I think. But then boomers come in at just shy 194 boomers in Congress and 66 senators. They have over half in Senate and just shy of half in the Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
2/3 in the Senate. They have the majority.
They have the supermajority.
They have the supermajority.
Yeah,
boomer supermajority.
That sounds like the worst rock band ever.
One of the greatest. Get some Eagles in there, and
but
work.
Aren't they all silent gen? Or are they? Oh no, I guess Eagles probably boomers. I don't know. But yeah, and the general population though, silent gen, which has still 21 people in Congress, even though they were alive for the Second World War. And 8 people in the Senate. Which again, there's more silent gen, and the silent gen, the youngest silent gen was born in 1945. Like that's the youngest. There's still 8 of them in the Senate. There's 3 millennials versus 8 silent.
There's a lot of them born in the 30s. Which, I don't know.
They're rounding off. I think like Chuck Grassley is rounding off like 100 fucking years old at this point.
I mean, if you round up, he's 100 because he's 96 now.
Yeah, he's very close.
My grandma's 96. She's ancient. I love her dearly, but like
you don't want her running the goddamn country. You wouldn't even want her running Iowa. So
we don't want her drive a fucking car. You think we want her voting for policy things? No.
Hold on. What's our opinion on Facebook and how social media should be regulated?
It turns out that she had a very negative social experience on social media where someone messaged her and told her that my aunt was dead and that they needed money to get my aunt's body to her. And that very much turned her off Facebook. She turned her profile to not public, and frankly has helped because she is then, she sees pictures of her grandkids, her great grandkids, her grandnieces, all that. And that's good. But then the random weirdos on the internet that are just trying to scam people don't get to do that, because if you can imagine being told that your kid is dead is not a good thing to hear. You'd be very visibly upset.
Well, and those elder scams on social media are fairly common too, sadly. But really, all Facebook is these days is a photo album, a digital photo album, and a shittier version of Craigslist.
Exactly. Mercer was smart enough to call my uncle, who then was like, "I'll call Janie," and turns out she's still alive. So all was okay. It was figured out to be a scam very quickly, but that is pretty stressful. And she's 96, and like I don't want my grandma having a
that's
to grandma
a little,
dying.
a little hard on the heart for somebody that age. Yeah.
Yeah, if you give my grandma a heart attack, I will go to the ends of earth to find you and ensure that you do not enjoy the consequence.
Yeah, no, that's fair, especially for something like that.
Yeah, over a few bucks. F you, man.
So your grandma is Silent Gen. Then she represents 5.5% of the general population, and her generation has still 8 Senate seats out of 100.
Yeah.
Boomers have 20%. You know, they're a big generation, 20.5% of the general population. But again, 2/3 of the Senate and nearly half of Congress. Gen X still bringing it up the back with a 19.5%, and we are now the biggest generation with 21.5%. Where Gen Z is right behind us with 21%, which is surprising. But as Gen Z starts voting, that's and getting into Congress, as again they have 8 congressmen already. They're already showing us up here.
I think the youngest congressman ever, by the way, not just the first Gen Z, but the literal youngest that has ever been.
Yeah, and I will
done.
Yeah, and I'll also remind you though, there's a limit restriction for the Senate. There is not for the House of Representatives.
Right? No, it's 25. It's 25 and 30.
Yep, 25, 30, and then 35 for the president.
Sorry,
that sounds right.
Yep. So, and I talk about this a lot in my content, you know, millennial content and millennial frustrations, obviously far and wide. We can't afford houses. We can't afford food. We can't afford student loans. We can't afford anything. And then when we complain about how our representation is, you know, had personally ridden a velociraptor, they're just not, a lot of people don't seem to understand why we haven't just taken the positions. Like, that's what their generation did. They ran for office and they got voted in and they ruined the world. Why can't you do the same? And I think that there's a lot of obstacles. It gets talked about a lot that we don't have that representation and we need more younger representation, but those obstacles do not get talked about hardly ever. In fact, we were doing some research looking for it and we couldn't find any talking about it.
I am a avid YouTuber. I've learned a lot of things from YouTube, how to sand floors, how to do, car repairs. And one of the big things I was really looking into was, what sort of obstacles might millennials have? Because clearly there have to be some. I don't think millennials are lazier or whatever on average
no
than any other generation. Why disparity? And there was not a lot of information out there. There was really no videos that directly pertain to that question,
which is strange. Because like we talk about this kind of stuff all the time, and I don't think it's
right.
And we're the YouTube generation, right? Before Gen Z was. We are the social media generation. So why is that not something that's there? So hopefully we can.
So we're changing that now.
We can dive into that a little bit.
That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna fix that problem.
Here is your how-to guide on how to run for Congress as a millennial.
Right. So, be born as a boomer. That would be right.
that is the
be born 40 years earlier. That's what you should have done. You wanted a house, you should have been born 40 years earlier. It's not our fault that you were too lazy to be born late.
Anyway,
but I mean, I think it's worth a genuine conversation about why there is less of us in those positions, and just to get into it, I'd say, we're all familiar in the work world. Boomers won't get the fuck out of the way and let us move up into better positions. They come out of retirement because they're bored and have nothing else to do and want their old seniority back. And again, it takes away our opportunities to move up. And that's the same with elected office. Obviously, they have to be reelected, but the average tenure of Congress is 9 years. The average Senate is 11 years. And 13 congressmen and senators have been in office uninterrupted right now for over 35 years. So longer than I've been alive, there's 13 people who have uninterrupted been in Washington, which is just insane. And so like, what are some of the reasons why they keep winning and younger people can't get in?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. Obviously, the easiest one to point to is incumbency, and that it's almost a double-digit advantage to be an incumbent and be running for that same seat again. The name recognition you get with that, the connections, just the processes that what to do as a candidate, everything is already there. So
the finances, you're not starting from scratch.
There's no reinvention of the wheel that you need to do the second time around.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, as you're saying, incumbents get 7 to 10 point advantages. Like that's huge. And one of you put this in here that 94% in the 2022 elections were won. 94% of elections were won by incumbents. So once you're in, you gotta suck pretty hard to not get reelected.
Yeah, if a president ran for reelection, they normally get reelected. I know I can think of just a couple in the last 100 years that got elected, ran for reelection, and lost. And I'm looking at Trump, Daddy Bush, Carter,
sadly,
and I don't really think of anyone else. I can't think of anyone else since 1900 that
Hoover would have been
Hoover. And I think there might have been one early one before Woodrow Wilson in there,
whatever. That's getting back. It's very, very good odds that if you've won your election once and you want to win it again, you're going to win that again. Which means that if you don't decide to step down and stop running, it is really hard for somebody who's younger to run and win that seat.
Please take retirement. Anyway, but I would also say that one other advantage that often gets overlooked is direct mailing. If you're updating your constituents about how you're doing in Congress in DC, you don't pay postage on it. The USPS just gives it to you. Right. If you are trying to do direct mailing to marketing to other people as just a candidate, you do not get that same advantage. There is an advantage, even if it's not allowed to be campaign related, but the name recognition, the fact that you're getting an update, the fact there is a potential touch point, someone might see your name for the very low printing it and shipping to them for free is an advantage. You get to kind of be more entrenched, and there are systemic things that help you stay entrenched.
That's a good point. I didn't even know that. That's that is huge, because I mean it's not a campaign thing, but if you're like, hey, this is what we accomplished, that's still kind of a campaign thing. You know what I mean? Like you're putting yourself out there in a positive light. I doubt that they're being like, yeah, we really fucked this one up, guys, in the mailer. That's not what's going out for free. So
those mailers are Instagram on steroids. You're putting up your best highlight reel you can find and put it out to your constituents, so they have something nice to talk about.
It's like those when we got the COVID money and Trump wanted to make sure that he had like a personal letter from him, like, hey, I gave you this money that's really your money, but you should thank me for it.
Signed by Donald Trump, like his name check.
Also, welfare is bad too, but
hey, this is not my money, but I want you to know that I gave it to you.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that just shows that we need that for all candidates.
Yeah.
We need publicly funded elections. We need more government involvement in the way that our elections are run, and not allow corporations to have such a large voice.
Yeah. And if you're a millennial and you want to run for Congress, how much money do you need to raise to try to win both the primary and then the main election?
Yeah, actually, so I've had the benefit of being introduced, and I'd consider her a friend now at this point, the vice chair of the DFL, and people keep suggesting that I run for things, and the last thing I've ever wanted to do was be in public office, but I figured it was worth at least asking questions and learning about things. And I was like, Congress, like my district has a Republican congressman. If I could unseat him, even if I sucked as a congressperson, I'd be doing something good, right? And she's like, yeah, maybe bring your sights down a little bit, because you need to raise at least $2 million if you realistically want to run for Congress. And like $2 million, and I get like it's not coming out of my pocket directly, but $2 million is a lot, and that's Congress. You know, there's 430 some odd Congress people. You want to run for Senate, you're looking at $11.5 million average is what they raise for Senate races, and they'll get way bigger on some of those high profile Senate races.
Sure.
With Congress, it varies, but you're looking at millions of dollars for either of those. And again, when you're an incumbent and you have the connections, you have the access to the PACs and the corporate donors and the party. You know, having connections within the party is another huge thing. All of those things. It's a lot easier for you to raise money. And now a lot of people, younger people, because Citizens United has been a train wreck for this country, are trying to run on an example of I'm not taking PAC money. And that's another handicap. But somebody has to take the high ground at some point and say that, hey, we can do this without PAC money, because as soon as you start taking it, you lose all credibility for getting rid of it. And, you know, so if you're running on that, which we need people to run on that,
yeah,
you can't take the PAC money, but then it's way harder to find those dollars because you're raising them from individuals giving you $10, $20 at a time.
And don't get me wrong, having that, but that also means having a lot of spread and a lot of, you know, reach that, you know, starting out is hard to do. You have to have good marketing, and not everyone has good marketing just available to them.
What were you going to say?
Yeah, I have a question. I have personally thought of running for office, not realistically.
But you're associated with us now, so.
Yeah, it's basically a done deal. Not going to ever happen. But I always thought that it would be interesting to use your campaign funded money to basically just do charity work and just like run like a drive to do whatever, or like build, you know, care packages or feed people using, I don't know. Is that even like, do you guys, I don't know if you guys know anything about campaign financing laws that specifically, but like, I always thought if you're going to be bringing in the money and you want to be public facing, why not do something actually good with that money? And
what you're starting to describe is a thing called Tammany Hall. And there's a book called Boss, and it was written about how corrupt the New York political system got because they effectively were doing welfare as a political party. So if your house burned down, you went to them, they'd set you up with new clothes, put you in a place, get you a couple meals, and get you kind of back on your feet. But then when the next election came around, they'd come knocking at your door and be like, hey, I need you to go vote for this guy.
Yeah.
And
very mobby feeling there.
Yeah, okay. That's a fair critique.
I see that. I think that what you're saying could be done on as long as it was a very transparent, way of doing it. And I don't know that it would work on the national level, but I think on a more local level, community level, absolutely, that'd be a great way. I mean, people get involved in food drives and all these kinds of things. And if you're like, hey, this is what all of my campaign, whatever you're doing, is going to be somehow related to charity that you're giving directly back to that community, not specifically people, but all of the people.
Right. Like you're packing school supplies for children. You're directly making food and feeding people that are walking through your lines. Like you're not offering to give like rides to to people or like buy them in cars or anything, but you're providing them a direct service. And I feel like we could do something if there's so much money involved with it. I think if we're not going to do publicly funded elections, at least like help the public with your election.
I still think publicly funded elections is where we need to go. You get X amount of dollars. It's taxpayer money. You're not allowed donations from anybody, period. Like you cannot accept donations. So that way, when you get elected, you are only allowed, or you only owe the people who voted for you. You don't owe any big donors or anything like that, I think.
Is there more well, go ahead.
Oh, I've just been that was my very first political opinion I ever formed. I was like, I'm going to say 12 because everything happened when I was 12, but it's probably younger. But yeah, that was my very first political opinion I ever formed, is publicly funded elections is what we need. Even as, a little preteen, I could see how bad money in politics was. was like, why don't we just have everybody get a certain amount of money, and that's what they get to run their elections with? And that's never 20 something years later.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe a different angle as well is if you're still going to do have to go do fundraising to do an election, make it so it has to be money out of your district. You can't just be hitting up people from wherever. They've got to be people that you are going to represent. And
I don't know.
Try to cap. Effectively, you need to cap the. Yeah, but you need to cap the money that's in politics, because the more you owe somebody, the easier it is to get primaried, the easier it is to fear for your job instead of, represent the people that you're elected to do.
Right. And then just I think it's not a direct 1-to-1. But Kevin McCarthy is a great example of this right now. Now that's not campaign finance, but some people in his party gave him a favor to get him into his position as Speaker of the House. And now he's clearly having to do everything he has to do to pay back that favor, or risk losing his job again. And it's bad for him. It's bad for his party. It's bad for the rest of the country.
Indeed.
And again, it's a good snapshot. It's again not a 1-to-1 because that wasn't campaign finance, but it's somebody who owes a small group of people a large debt, and they hold that over his head repeatedly.
Every chance they get.
And to the detriment of everybody else.
And it really is closer to 1-to-1 than you think when you consider it. He has his position as speakership, and that's what's being held hostage.
Yeah.
Your position as a congressman or a senator is being held hostage by whoever is going to give you the most money to help you run for the seat. So it really is. We can see it there, and it is very close.
Yeah. And it's very public and obviously very painful for people, because if now the U.S. isn't going to pay its debts, we're going to default. Oh, now the U.S. is going to go into shutdown because whatever fucking now we're going to try to come up with an impeachment for no apparent reason, and this is
Hunter Biden's laptop.
It's got Hillary's emails on it, I was told.
Oh God, Jesus fucking Christ. I will say that, especially for the government shutdown, they're still making people go to work, and they're not paying them for the work they do. And they're like, we'll pay you back when we decide to fund the government. So you're still going to pay these people. And a lot of these people you're going to send home, they will do no work, and they're going to get paid for doing no work. So when the Republicans complain that we spend all this money and get nothing for it, it's because you told them to. If you're going to shut down the government, you're going to cause these many billions of dollars in wages to get paid. And many of those workers are going to go home and not do anything. That's bad. But it's worse for the people you send to work, like air traffic controllers, because why do you want them to not be worried about paying their bills?
Yeah, that, again, comes back to our personal safety. It doesn't just hurt the people who aren't getting paid. It hurts everybody.
I mean, I've got a couple friends who are traffic controllers, and they showed the first check they got during the last government shutdown, which is 35 days. One check was for 48 cents and one check was for no money. That is not how you pay your bills for a month.
They sent him a $0 check.
They sent her a $0 check, but they also sent everybody in air traffic control a $0 check, or as far as I know. So they still were sending out checks.
Postal service, workers going.
It is worth mentioning, though, that Congress continues to get paid through a shutdown.
I will say Matt Gaetz has asked to not be paid during this shutdown because he understands how crap the optics are.
Yeah, the optics are bad. I actually
Gaetz is riding that train, though. He is saying this is not a good idea for our
which is weird, because he's also part of the Freedom Caucus that is holding Kevin McCarthy.
He's also
hostage.
The reason it's happening.
He's the reason that it's happening, and then he's also like, "Oh, I'm taking the moral high ground." The fuck you are. Just pass the fucking budget, and it wouldn't be a problem.
Clearly,
or pass a continuing resolution and keep negotiating, which is something that is considered a relatively reasonable thing, because the budget is big, it is complicated, and there are some negotiations that are able to happen.
Absolutely, but they're able to do this month to month until they figure it out with avoiding a government shutdown. It's just we're coming up to an election, and shutdowns look bad for incumbents, and that's what they're trying to do, is just make the incumbent look bad. Except the publicity,
they're the majority.
Now is exactly the publicity is now such that it's going to backfire on them, because everybody knows who's doing it. I did learn here recently though that I think a person in Congress, a woman in Congress, introduced the McCarthy Shutdown Act. And because it's Congress and it's everything's an acronym, McCarthy is an acronym, and it's my constituents cannot afford rebellious tantrums. Handle your shutdown act. McCarthy Shutdown Act.
That's pretty.
I
awesome.
love it, and
That's
it's
awesome.
and all it is an act to make it so Congress doesn't get paid when it's shut down. And I understand the idea, because this is always really popular thing is like Congress shouldn't get paid when this happens and Congress shouldn't get paid when that happens, and to me I think it's a waste of time to really focus on those things, because they do not make their money off of their salary. Some freshman congressmen definitely scrape to get by. I'll give that. But senior congressmen and senators and all of the people who you're trying to hurt with this, they're not making their 6-figure, 5-6-figure checks that they get from the government is, they're walking around money. That is not where they're making their money. They're making their money in their insider trading that's legal for them and nobody else for some reason. And they're making their money from,
speaking engagements,
exactly,
book writing, if you call some of those books.
So it's like, I get it, but it's also, I feel like it's an empty, hollow thing. They could most of them, except for like, the freshman ones that are sitting in there usually trying to do the right thing because they haven't been corrupted by 30 fucking years in Washington. They are the ones that are going to be hurt by it, but everybody else is going to be just fine. They aren't losing any skin off of their teeth for that.
Sure. And I guess is that, and that not getting paid, especially for someone who is, needing to bring in money. Do you think that is a detriment for some of the millennials running for office?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of our biggest obstacles. And I think that's the one that gets overlooked the most.
Yeah, it's an obstacle for us. It's a huge obstacle for Gen Z, even more so. You look at a guy like Maxwell Frost, who was just elected. I have in here in an interview, he said that he actually drove for Uber for a few months after he had started his campaign. So he was still driving for Uber while campaigning.
Which also props to him that he's working a real job still, or whatever you want to call Uber. Like, he's working a job and campaigning for Congress, which is a full-time job. Campaigning for Congress is a lot of work.
You got to spend at least a year, if not more than a year, basically full-time, like on the road, speaking engagements, all this stuff. It's a very strenuous, and it takes up a lot of time. So,
and I think that's something that gets overlooked too, just in general, is why are there not more young people running? And you look at when boomers started getting to the age where they were running for political office and things like that, a lot of them could afford to have a one-income household. A lot of them had some equity in their life. They had a house, they had a established career, and all of these things. And we don't, because they're like, once they got it, they just started pulling up the ladder and selling us bootstraps. And that's
also remind me, did they also have on average $40,000 of student loan debt over their heads?
No, you see, sure. they were able to pay that off with their summer job.
I don't understand, how is it the same thing then?
Yeah, they started from zero. Yeah, they started from zero. Millennials started in the hole. And boomers seem to not understand that, of like, if we could only have started from zero, right? How much more
we would have all loved to have just started on level ground and not in the basement, with the stairs taken out. And that's and I think like the stay-at-home wife thing is a big thing too, is like, now you have two working people in a relationship. You don't even have that disposable time that you used to have. Like, you could go to work and then spend some time working on building a campaign and things like that until you really got it ramped up. You got to come home and do dishes and do all that shit, because you don't have the stay-at-home spouse who's taking care of your kids and cleaning and cooking and doing all that stuff, because she's got to go to work too, or he, or whatever. Your spouse has got to go to work too. Your spouse has to do all these chores too. We don't have that disposable income. We don't have that disposable time. And if you don't have that, how are you supposed so my donors can give me more money and have less ties to me, less transparent ties. Well, yeah, let's change that. Let's make that work for me. And that keeps everybody else out.
Yeah.
Well,
and
like we've, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
No, I was just saying, I feel like we've adequately explained that.
Beat this horse to death. About
just die. Not already. I agree.
Clearly, there's a lot to be said about it, and there's a lot to.
So, kind of opinion,
that is the biggest obstacle. Like that money and disposable time thing is one of, if not the biggest obstacle that younger people face. But that being said, there are definitely some younger people getting involved now, with the exception of Maxwell Frost, the Gen Z just showing us all up. There's some 30 and 40-year-olds, which again, they're above the average of what it used to be. But they're spring chickens compared to the current crop of what we have today.
Right. 20 to 25 years younger than the average.
Right. It's sad when we're looking at people in their 40s and being like, wow, it's nice to see some young faces in here. But it's true, and it's refreshing. I think right off the bat, Jeff Jackson, a lot of people have personal experience with him because he has managed to leverage social media, specifically TikTok, in a way that nobody else has. And he's talking directly to constituents, and not just his constituents, but constituents around the world in a very direct manner. And it's obviously resonating with people. He's got millions of followers now on TikTok.
Who would have thought? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Finish shot. I'll give my one-liner.
I was just gonna say that he's got millions of followers there on TikTok, and he's got respect from both sides of the aisle. Like I know Republicans, I know Democrats, I know independents. I have people say I've got no idea what party he is because he keeps it so nonpartisan when he does this stuff, and he's just like, hey, I'm in the room in Congress, and this is what's happening. And the opposition party or the minority party doesn't use Democrat, doesn't use Republican, but he comes in and he speaks to people and lets them know what's going on in a way that people can understand and feel like they have a representative who's actually representing them and actually communicating with them. And that's huge. And that's part of what younger people can do is like, hey, I know how the TikTok works and collecting the face data and using the Wi-Fi. And we can use the ticky-tack to communicate with the youngins. So
it turns out what he's been able to do on the kids dancing application is nothing short of astounding. And the fact that he was willing to go out there and explain some of these very complicated issues in very easy to describe terms. He was never in your face about it. He is not trying to get your attention. He is trying to teach you, and it shows. With him being an incumbent, though, is he likely to win?
Sadly, this goes back to gerrymandering, which we talked about, with Wisconsin. His current position is about to be gerrymandered out from under him, which is not the first time that this has happened. It happened when he was a state representative as well, and that's how he became a federal representative. It's not looking great for him at the moment. And he came on and he talked about that in very plain English on how that was happening. He didn't really point fingers on it. He said that this isn't necessarily a good way that government should work. And he's like seemed less stressed about it than probably most of his voters will be, honestly. And I hope to see more big things from him. But
yeah, I've watched a bunch of his stuff, and I feel like he, as a freshman congressman, he has opened that door, and that air that blows in, the doors is a really fresh gust of air.
Yeah.
And he does a really amazing job just reaching everyday people on both sides of the aisle over TikTok. But I was watching, and I will say the only thing that I maybe wanted more of, and is sort of somewhat antithetical to that approach, is just a little bit more of like a policy push during maybe some of these votes. I know how he describes how people are on the floor versus off the floor in front of cameras, and all that stuff is very important. I think we absolutely needed that. and it's clear he's struck a chord that people can take. But I would really, if he makes it past this gerrymandering in North Carolina next year, I would really love to see him maybe push a little bit more on some of the votes. Yeah, policy platforms on some of the votes that are happening, because he has the platform. He has the followers.
Yep.
If he wants to help the progressive platform, which I think he does.
Yeah.
Sure.
He has the opportunity.
Yeah, I think so too. And honestly, I think if he does get gerrymandered out of his current position, I'm gonna guess, and I shouldn't assume things because I'm usually wrong, but I assume that he's going to end up being like governor. What?
You're making a prediction. You never make predictions. I'm super excited.
I never make predictions, but I do think that, governor. Democrats are stupid. I mean, they genuinely are, and I don't put it past them to waste him. They're like, hey, we've got this new fresh person that's obviously resonating with the kind of voters that we need paying attention to us. But let's not do that. And we got any more of that crusty old mayonnaise? Let's put that up again for another shot. It's not been working great, but this is the time.
Hey, we
guys.
You know what? We have a new fresh face named Beto O'Rourke doing great things in Texas. Should we support him? It's Texas. No. Comes back in.
Yeah.
All right, we'll try it again. And we're gonna be like, we're gonna support him now. It's like it's kind of wait, man. Like he needed to do the things before, not.
AOC has always been a popular one. Everybody knows about her. I don't think we need to go on it. She was kind of the charge that led the whole millennial progressive revolution through, the 20 teens there. And
she's certainly the most popular, probably millennial, congresswoman, representative of all time. To date, at least.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would definitely argue that I'd agree with that argument. And then you got her squad of young people, which includes somebody from our home state. Squad.
The squad. Squad.
Gen Z kids say, and squad.
Probably not though. Actually.
Yeah, I don't know. Fam.
That's cringe.
Fire.
God, we're fucking old. We're not even old enough to be in Congress at this point.
Right? Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, we've got part of that squad who's another millennial representative, which is Ilhan Omar, and she's been pretty vocal on a lot of things. Obviously, gotten a lot of hate for some pretty fucked up reasons.
Yeah,
probably one of the more
I don't want to say outspoken, but just honestly, probably is appropriate. Certainly controversial in some of the things that she said, but her takes are I'm pretty sure she American standpoint, and she's just pointing out factual issues with some of the ways that we run our country and some of the ways that we do with foreign policy. Being an immigrant, being born in Africa, being the first African woman to be in Congress, and first African American woman for Minnesota as well. Like, she has a very unique perspective on what it means to be a refugee, to what it means to live in some place that's not considered a first world country, that or Western. So we impact those areas and things that we do and things that we say. So her perspective is really important. And I think she's gotten a lot of flack that's probably racially or
it's racist. She's gotten a lot of racist flack. There's no two ways about it. I mean, the shit, and especially, being here in Minnesota and rural Minnesota and some of the shit you hear people say behind closed doors. It's not fair to her at all. And I got to say, I really do respect. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to be a person of her color and faith. Standing up there, being front and center, being vocal. And, I mean, I would say that of all the people in Congress, she is probably one of the ones who's most at risk, realistically, of some sort of violent attack.
She gets tons of death threats. It's very common for her, unfortunately. But to all the people who maybe not know anything about what she said or done, one of the things that I was reading, this is a quote from her in regarding foreign policy, is that sorry, I didn't get that right. Mark on the clip.
Oh no, he would be considered a fucking socialist commie, considering he's probably responsible for, killing more fascists than any other president in history. The exception of maybe FDR, but he was still actually on the ground doing it. So,
he was in charge of it. He didn't actually have to go shoot at anybody, but being in charge of logistics and the strategy mattered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, there's some others, and not all of our young folk getting involved right now are necessarily good, because just being young doesn't necessarily make you competent or qualified or passable as human. There's Anna Polina Luna, who I really, that just sounds like a bad music festival to me. That she's from Florida, which answers a lot of your questions. Florida's 13th.
But we will.
Probably will. She was in a congressional hearing, and I don't even remember what it was on. It was something to do with our relations with China, and that wasn't really the topic of the congressional hearing. But staying on topic is hard for certain people from Florida. And she was asking this person about how, if she knows that China hates us and all of this kind of stuff. And this person's like, I have no personal or professional knowledge on that. This person was a doctor, mind you. She'd been to school for longer than the 8th grade, unlike Anna Polina Luna. And when she said this, Anna, whatever the fuck her name is, was like, well, you should read Breitbart and educate yourself. And on the congressional on the floor of Congress during a congressional hearing, she's like, Breitbart's where you need to be getting your news from. And thankfully, we had another millennial sitting next to her from Texas, Jasmine Crockett from Texas 30th, and she. The attitude of the what bitch look in her eye when she said that, and then when it was her turn to speak, she wraps it back around and she's like, I just want to make this clear to everybody watching this that you should never reference Breitbart for anything, and just tore her a new one. She's one that's great. It's awesome to see somebody out of Texas, African-American woman too, minority female from a very conservative state, making waves and really laying the hammer down. She's worth watching. But back to the bad ones, probably one of the most on the other side of AOC.
The anti-AOC.
The anti-AOC.
In almost every way.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. She's also from Florida, I found out. unfortunately representing Colorado now, but it makes a lot more sense. You know, that Blobert is is up here.
Going to a theater in Florida means a completely different thing than going to a theater in Colorado. Apparently, I don't think she knew that. I think it's an honest mistake, and it'll never happen again. Just like she'll never go on a date with the so-called Democrat that she went on a date with once. But even though that's a bad thing, she'll never do it again. But yeah,
she was just looking for his Beetlejuice.
She should have just said it 3 times. Always works for me. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I just it's a cartoon character. It's just genuinely a cartoon character. See, young doesn't always mean great. I mean,
I also
we should just elect people because they're young.
Certainly.
With her, she has had some very serious challenges to her seat from I forget his name. He's from Aspen, one of the people on the city council there, and he got within 546 votes of unseating her. Someone, as we've said before, has a 10-point lead by just being an incumbent. And a district that Trump won by over 20 points still almost lost her seat with all of those advantages to a Democrat.
And just to put
competency matters.
546 votes is like a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, it was 327,285 people voted in that election. It is infinitesimally small, and that was about as razor close to a margin as you're going to see for a seat in Congress.
Yeah,
if you thought the Florida election was close and needed to be recounted, that's one that legitimately needed to be recounted.
Yeah. That definitely needed to be recounted, and hopefully, because she's up again and obviously hasn't made herself any better press lately.
I don't think so.
I hopefully will be getting rid of that particular millennial. So, like, again, I'm not just saying. I'll never suggest that you should just vote for somebody simply because they're younger, but it doesn't hurt to have younger people.
Yeah, people who know how like the internet works wouldn't hurt, especially watching like, you know, some of the senators ask like Zuckerberg questions on on like Facebook. It's painful to watch because it shows that their level of understanding of the internet, like they think Facebook is the internet, not that it is a website on the internet or an application on your phone.
Don't you know the internet is just a network of tubes? Come on.
God.
Hey, it's like, again, there's never a bad time for Futurama references. It's like Futurama's public transportation. That's just the internet, you know? Except when they go to the internet in Futurama, it's like Tron.
Yeah, which would be a cooler version of the internet, but it's not.
I'm trying to do that with the metaverse, but clearly nobody really cares yet. Maybe in like a decade, somebody will care.
Yeah. Well, that'll be one of those things. They'll look back in the future, and it'll be like, you know, Betamax or something, where it'll be like this was revolutionary for the time, but they weren't ready.
Blu-ray for
dumb
HD, HD DVD versus Blu-ray. Why did we end up with Blu-ray? Because Sony put it in every goddamn PlayStation, and there were so many more of them out in the world.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, I have a feeling that'll be an interesting one to look back, because eventually we'll get to that more immersive digital experience. But Meta ain't it.
And Meta is not it.
No. And I don't know. Did you want to talk a little bit more about Maxwell Frost?
I feel like we basically covered
him.
I mean, he's for basically every progressive policy point that we would be for. I don't know his exact policy measures in his efforts and his wants to reduce gun violence. Obviously, he's younger, and school shootings have been a thing a lot longer than. Or have been much more prevalent since we were in high school and we were in schooling, and his Gen Z generation, that is, if not the biggest issue on their minds, it's one of the huge issues. Obviously, we have a lot of wide-ranging thoughts about gun control and its actual effectiveness, and you know who it generally affects, and we're definitely going to discuss that at a later point.
We'll be doing an episode on that all by itself.
But but other than that, I think he is basically the perfect candidate for Gen Z to have as their
It's awesome. And hey, he's trying to change the curve on Florida, because that's where he was elected, right?
Yeah. Central
Snaps.
Florida.
Yeah, Central Florida. So that's I mean, that's impressive. A young progressive out of Central Florida being elected to Congress is an accomplishment all in itself.
Absolutely.
And it not being a Florida man. Like that's
Yeah.
you know, stereotypes
Major
can
steps.
change. I'm still not holding my breath, but we may get there. So he can do it. Anybody can do it, right? I mean, I hate using that kind of.
No, that's
I don't
sucks.
think anybody can do it, but
just because he could do it doesn't mean that everyone can do it. But it does show there is a path. You know, you do have to go collect the signatures. You have to go register yourself in the primary. You have to go raise money and win that primary. Once you win that primary, you have to go raise more money and go win that election. And then you finally get to go to Congress, where you still have to raise more money because within the next 2 years, you are back up for election and money is going to increase your odds. So while having good policy takes you some of the way, you also have to have some of that infrastructure. So make no mistake that everything is fueled on money one way or the other. It's why they say follow the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if he got through it, if there is that path to do it, it's not hopeless, as we just went through and told you how hopeless it was, but there is some younger people getting involved. I think that, kind of highlighting some of those is a good idea. And I think the thing that gets overlooked the most, and I'm guilty of this, like people again suggest that I run for stuff all the time. And I'm like, I don't really want to. And if I did, I want to do something that, would be national. Like I want to be congressman or senator or something like that, which I don't actually want to be, but like
for them stars, huh?
Ah, right. Aim high. And I think that's what gets all the attention, but the real groundwork happens on local levels. And most of these people started at local levels. You get started on city council, you get started on school boards, you get started on state representation. That's where you need to get in. That's where you start making these connections. That's where you start learning how the system works.
County commissioners, right?
Yeah, absolutely. County commissioners, township boards, there's all kinds of local positions that if you have the motivation to run, you're probably going to get elected, because a lot of these run uncontested for forever. And it's just the same people. They just show up and like 7 people go vote. And it's not glamorous, but these are the people that make the decisions that directly impact your life in your communities all the time. And then those decisions and those impacts grow. That impacts the state. That impacts the federal government eventually. In fact, we watched something here recently about how state legislation ends up impacting the federal government. You remember that blue line thing? Anyway, there's after so many states pass legislation like rights for gay marriage. What were some of the other ones?
Was it abortion?
Abortion rights. Oh yeah, I think it was abortion rights. There's after a certain percentage of the states pass legalizing weed. We're well on the way with that one now too. After so many states pass it, it gets enough national support that the federal government passes it. And that's the way it goes with a ton of big federal wins that we take as federal wins. We're really a conglomerate of state wins that resulted in the federal government reflecting what the rest of the country was doing. So that's how important that state representation is and getting involved. So I think that's a big thing is, don't worry about if you can run for Congress, if you can run for Senate, run for whatever local positions are available that are affecting the things that are affecting your life and your community.
Especially when you consider that, like when people run for mayor, there's a large percentage of even large cities where less than 15% of the electorate, less than 15% of the electorate shows up to vote, which means you don't need to get hundreds of thousands of votes for a lot of these positions. There's plenty of township positions that, there's only a couple hundred votes there. I bet you with a little bit of campaigning, you can pick up a couple hundred votes.
And it's not big money campaigning. It's literally door knocking. It's time. It's sweat equity, but it's not. You don't need to spend money to win these kinds of seats. And those get you into positions. And those get you connections. and those move you up because there's always a next step in government to go until you hit president, and you'll probably die shortly after because you're going to be fucking ancient, apparently.
Or you live Barack Obama's life, and you just get to chill out on every tropical island and have,
Yep,
the American dream. Awesome.
Yep, he won the post presidency. I mean, Carter won the post presidency.
Carter won the post presidency.
No, but okay, so Carter won the public post presidency. Like, Carter's just the best human to have ever sat in the White House.
Sure.
But Barack Obama's living the best post presidency life. Like,
yeah, I'll give that.
Kind of out of the public eye, just like windsurfing and parasailing and cruising around on jet skis and shit.
And
like
making his own documentaries when it suits him. And I like his stuff.
Just doing Netflix. Random cameos and fucking shit like on Netflix for no reason. Yeah. He
shows up for what he believes in now and gets to do what he wants to do.
He did a cameo in Adam Ruins Everything.
Adam Conover's
yeah. And it was on taxes, and I just remember him like sitting there like you really just agreed to just fucking do a cameo on this? Like, I mean, I love Adam Ruins Everything is one of my favorite shows, and it's just like Barack Obama, the former president of the United States.
Well, I think the one that you're thinking of was actually a Obama Foundation documentary that Adam Conover was the spokesperson for. And
yes.
So it was appropriate that he was there.
It makes sense, yeah.
But it was still funny. Like he still has that
swag,
the swagger with the him and Joe hanging out at the White House sort of stuff. Like, still classic.
Yeah.
And his classic, you got a lot of pauses, but it ends up making sense eventually.
Naturally.
Yeah. So I guess getting back to it is that really is, if you want to be president someday, you got to start at like city council or school board or township commissioner or some shit. Like that's where it starts. And even if you don't want to be president, if you want to be in office and you have the drive and motivation to be in office, that's where it starts. And I know it doesn't seem like you make a lot of difference in those positions, but you do. You make
zoning ordinances. Yeah, zoning ordinances make a big difference on how your life is. Some of those smaller municipal things, they touch more people. A lot of that gets delegated down to those positions. You have a lot more, effect on your constituents. Same way your constituents have a lot more, vocality with you. If it only takes a couple hundred people to get you elected, you're not trying to listen to 700,000 people that the average rep is. It's a couple hundred. That's a lot more manageable. You can interface with folks. You can talk to them. You can be a good representative for democracy.
Yep. And you can do something that will positively or negatively affect those few hundred people's lives, which is impactful. I mean, if you can say that you've genuinely changed the lives of a few hundred people, that's pretty huge, right?
Yeah. And I think part of the call to action is you can go to your local county clerk's website and learn how to sign up, how to do these. Your local city council website and learn how to run. When is their election? What do you have to do to run in their election if you're interested in it? Again, Absolutely. They're looking for people, and we can be those people, but we have to go do it.
Yep, we do. And then the other thing is, if it's not, in the cards for you, because a lot of us are just barely scraping to get by, that's okay too. But you still absolutely have to vote. It is one of the things that our generation, younger people in general, don't do enough of. It's part of the reason why the boomers keep their grip on us, is not because they're the biggest generation. I mean, it's partially because they're the biggest generation, or we're the biggest generation.
Used to be.
But we're the biggest generation now, and Gen Z is a big generation, and Gen X accounts for, a few percentage points shy of both of us. But we're, as generations, pretty fucking apathetic when it comes to the voting booths, and if we don't vote, boomers get to keep deciding everything, because that's what they do. They've got nothing better to do. And I get they're retired and angry because Tucker Carlson told them to be. But they
formerly.
Yeah. Well, if they can figure out X, and they're going to pay the monthly subscription now. But if you don't get out and vote, you're allowing them to continue to do this for us. And we do have, I know it sucks. I know it's a lot of times it's holding your nose and voting for people you don't like, but you got to get out and vote in these local fucking elections. You got to vote the down ballot to get the people that you
Mhm.
do want into the positions where you can vote for them on the up ballot. And that's
And voting on those off-year elections matters because so few people show up when the national elections are not happening. You know, there's a dip
more than in an off-year election, like by far.
So at very least, go vote. There is a way to do that, whether you get an absentee ballot or whether you have the ability to walk in and early vote, or you have the ability to show up on voting on election day and cast your ballot. So
and voting sexy, right? I mean, like we have like Rock the Vote and all the rappers and the Taylor Swifts and stuff coming out to tell us how sexy voting is.
The T-Swizzles.
The T-Swizzle.
Swifties.
Yeah, you know,
I mean, they're for real.
Voting,
you know,
voting sexy.
Yeah, I mean, she's a 9, but only votes in national elections. That makes her a 3 at best.
That is true. Yeah, nothing's less sexy than non-socially committed. Well, anyone, right?
Yeah, you know, it's your world. You do live in it. You do have more say, and you have a lot more say in those elections. But you only get the say if you go do the thing. If you sit at home and be like, well, why does this ordinance for zoning suck so hard? Well, that is a thing that is, you know, keeping you from building, you know, a house, or keeping you from building more density, or keeping affordable housing being built in your town. You can go fix that, but it requires you to go vote so it can be
show up. At the very minimum, show up. If you can't do more than that, show up. And it will sometimes be frustrating because you won't always get the things that you wanted voted for.
No.
But if you don't show up at all, you got no right to bitch about it. You just don't. So
that's almost a good ending.
I think that is our ending. All right, guys. Thank you once again for tuning in. We had some technical difficulties in the middle that we'll do our best to edit out.
They didn't happen. The magic of editing. It didn't happen.
Yeah. But we don't know how smoothly we went in and out of those. So you might experience that. We apologize. And we, again, appreciate you guys sticking it out with us while we're figuring this out. We are spending more and more money on this every time we show up to film another episode. So you guys sticking through and watching is really greatly appreciated. We're really trying to make it more quality content, better production for you every time. Again, thank you so much for Chris for donating so much of your time. Thank you to Chris's wife for letting Chris donate so much of his time to us, because she's not always been the happiest about it, I don't think. But we appreciate her. We love her. She's awesome.
I'm taking her to dinner as soon as we are done here. So the way to her heart is through her stomach, and you know we will fix the problem.
As it should be.
As it should be. All right. Thank you, everybody. We love you. Go eat some avocado toast.
Yeah,
Till next time.
Tuning in.